Morning Quest. Let me invite you to stand up and sing with us about our need for God's presence and power in our lives. Wake up, eyes open wide to mercy, waiting is brand new. Your love's taking me over again. You clap your hands if you want. Your love, I find wherever I go. Your love's just to know you and be loved is enough. And I'm thinking to myself, is that true? To know God, I think it's a hunger in all of our hearts to know God, whoever God is, to know God and to be loved, to know that we are somehow carried, somehow held, and somehow loved. And I think that that's kind of the deepest needs of our heart and what we here at The Quest really want to be all about, knowing God and loving others, loving God. So welcome. We're glad that you're here this morning to worship with us. Welcome to those of you on Facebook Live. We know that there are a lot of people who watch every week, so we're glad that you're here too. If you're here in the room and you want to check in on Facebook and add a picture and tag somebody, that's cool. It helps people know kind of where you are and helps get the word out about this great place. Take a minute and greet each other and welcome one another and give hugs and handshakes and all that good stuff. As you're coming back to your seats, you're welcome, of course, to sit. You can stand up. This is another song that really expresses the desires of my heart and I hope of yours. Here's my heart, Lord. Speak what is true. I pray that God will speak truth into our lives this morning. Here's my heart, Lord. Here's my heart, Lord. Here's my heart, Lord. Speak what is true. Here's my heart, Lord. Here's my heart, Lord. Here's my heart, Lord.
good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Quest. Good morning. My name's Christine. I am Kids Quest Director. I have a couple announcements. After service today, we are having a congregational meeting. All are welcome. And it's to give you an update on our finances, property sale, nursery daycare center, homeless shower, our new QLT member, which is Quest Leadership team member, and the PST formation. That's our pastoral search team, the PST formation. So that's today after service. On April 28th, that's not next Saturday, but Saturday after, in a couple weeks, we are going to be doing our Quest Out, and that's when we go out into the community. We serve our neighbors. We are going to help beautify the grounds of North Marin Community Services and the Nevada Youth Center, and that is at 680 Wilson Avenue, and it's from 9 a.m. to 12 noon. We'd love everyone to come and help. I've got some sign-up sheets. If you can please sign up, let us know what time you can be there. And you can come from 9 to 12 or an hour if you can. Please bring gardening tools. And we do need a pickup truck. If someone can help with their pickup truck, we need to bring a power washer and a couple of wheelbarrows. And please let Susie know if you can do that. Also, bring your kids, because I do have some kid-sized gardening tools. So, yes. So April 28th, 9 to 12. That's it. Kids Quest and middle school, high school. We can go.
We're going to take an offering now. So if you are a quester, if you've been around here for a while and you want to help support what God's doing in this ministry, please give. We absolutely need that, and we trust that God is going to provide our needs, and a lot of those needs are met through the members of the Quest. So we are grateful as you give. And those of you who are new, please don't feel any obligation to give. We're just glad you're here. This is a song, it's new to us. It's by a band called The Many, and I've been raving about them for a couple of weeks, I know. We've done one of their songs already. I grew up in a kind of a Christian tradition that really valued knowing your doctrine, like every single thing, like every I dotted and every T crossed. And if you didn't know every single thing that you believed, I mean, you might be going to hell. I don't know. And that's really kind of how I lived my life for a long time. What if I don't know everything? What if I don't get it right? I thought there might be some big entrance exam, and if I just failed one little thing, who knows? Who knows? Thank God I have grown and come to an understanding that's so much greater than that, so much more loving and open, and I believe that God is not up there keeping records and making sure that we all believe the right exact things. But this song says that so beautifully. And the bridge especially just moves me. It says, we don't have to be strong. We don't have to be sure. We don't have to be right. We don't have to see any blinding light. We can just be. And then the chorus is, your love is here. God's love is here. And I'm so grateful for that.
Yes, I want to trust in my heart of hearts. Your love is here. Oh, I want to rest in those strong arms. Yes, I want to trust in my heart of hearts. Your love is here. So I will sing, your love is here, and it's greater than our doubts. Your love is greater than our fears. Our broken hearts, and somehow we can hear your love is here. in no strong arches. I want to trust in my heart of hearts that your love is here. Oh, I want to rest in no strong arches. I want to trust in my heart of hearts that your love is here. So I will sing, your love is here, and it's greater than our doubts. Your love is greater than our fears. Yes, I will sing, your love is here, and it sees our broken hearts. Somehow we can hear your love is here. We don't have to be strong. We don't have to be sure. We don't have to be right. We don't have to see any blinding lights. We don't have to be strong. We don't have to be sure. We don't have to be right. We don't have to see any blinding lights. We don't have to be strong. We don't have to be sure. We don't have to be right. We don't have to see any blinding lights. We can just be. So I will sing, your love is here, and it's greater than our doubts. Your love is greater than our fears. Yes, we will sing, your love is here, and it sees our broken hearts. Somehow we can hear your love is here. Your love is here, and it's greater than our doubts. Your love is greater than our fears. And we will sing, your love is here, and it sees our broken hearts. Somehow we can hear your love is here.
I'm excited to welcome our guest speaker for the third week in a row. This is Mark Scandrette, and he is awesome. Last week I embarrassed him by having him stand up here while I read this huge list of accomplishments and so on. So I won't do that to him. I won't do that to him today.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But you can Google his name, and you'll find out all the wonderful things that he's been a part of. He's a coach. He has been a pastor. He has this awesome nonprofit that he runs, and just all kinds of good stuff. He's an author, so check him out, and I know you'll enjoy him today. He has kind of written a song that embodies these 9 Beatitudes that we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks. And if you've been around, you know that they actually have motions for each one of these movements. And so I want to invite you to stand. And as we prepare for this kind of introductory song going into the message, Mark is going to lead us in the motions while we sing the words. So are you ready? Okay. Today I want to live with open hands, mourn what's broken, serve with self-respect. Today I want to use my power for good, look with compassion, walk in honesty. Today I want to reach past difference, suffer suffer for love and live fearlessly, following the way of radical love, following today the way of love, following the way of radical love, following the way of radical love, following today the way of love.
If you would, stay standing for just a moment. And I thought we could start today by reviewing the homework for the week. Do you guys remember the homework for the week? Where our goal was to remember that we're beloved and that anyone we see or interact with is also beloved. So put your hand on your heart for just a second and say this with me. I am made in the divine image, a creature of infinite dignity and worth. Now turn to one other person and tell them that too. You are made in the divine image, a creature of infinite dignity and worth. All right, let's try it one more time. Turn to another person now that you've got the words down and say it to them. You are made in the divine image, a creature of infinite dignity and worth. Right on. All right, good job. You can go ahead and get seated. Last week, for those of you who were here, we were exploring the way of humility. And one thing that we've been trying to understand together is that knowing wise things does not change our lives in itself. They have to be applied. We have to put them into practice. And so I gave us the challenge to take on a couple of practices over the last week. So now it's time for our homework check-in, if you don't mind. And so I'm going to ask, did anybody get a chance this week to take the time to say that mantra or that affirmation during the week? Raise your hand if you took a shot at that and you tried it out. Okay, a couple of people? Great. And then one other homework assignment to try was to go, how could I either serve or be served? Like find ways to do the hard jobs, to respect the dignity of others in my life by taking on a hard job. Or if it's hard for me to ask for help, actually open myself up and ask for help. Did anybody try something on this? Great. Would anybody have the courage to share a little bit about their experience with either of these practices this week? What did you notice as a result of trying this on? Yeah, great. Jane, you might want to stand up and project.
When I commute only 2 days out of the week, I am not a nice person in my car. So this week, I'm doing this instead of something else. Instead of cursing that their mother or father gave birth to them, blessing the fact they're in front of me without their turn signals. So
Yeah. Good. Great. That's great. Awesome. Yeah, Matt.
Well, it's just a little thing. We had a fine batch at Susie's house last night, and I checked with Susie and Aaron to be sure it was okay to take a doggy bag over to Amelina's house, and they said it was all right, and I did, and she was thrilled.
Yeah, terrific. Right on. One thing I noticed this week from my family, which is pretty cool, is that it feels like our dishwasher stayed a lot more, our dish drain stayed a lot more clean this week because somebody was trying to do the homework at my house. It was me. And Lisa, did you notice that? Yes. All right, good. So we're going to move on today to, in case you haven't been here, we've been looking at the Beatitudes as the ninefold path of a new way of life. And the first week we explored all of the Beatitudes a little bit and got an overview. And last week we looked at the way of humility. And this week we're going to look at the fifth Beatitude, the way of compassion. a place where Jesus said, "Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy." And I want to start off just by reading a few words of reflection on the topic of mercy and compassion. Most of us live with a sense that something inside of us is broken. We don't always treat other people the way we want to be treated, and people don't always treat us with the love and respect we feel we deserve. Our sense of what is right and wrong is violated. How we handle these mistakes and failures really matters. We are faced with a choice: allow our failures to define us and others, live with self-loathing, shame, and resentment, or let go of the desire to punish and take revenge. This beatitude invites us to give up our judging and contempt, to look at ourselves and each other through eyes of kindness and compassion. So I had a chance this week to reflect a bit on the struggle to look at myself compassionately and treat others with compassion. And when I look back through my life, there are times that this has been a particular struggle for me. It's not every day, but things come up in life where either I experience failure and my limits and struggle, or I've been wounded or hurt by others. One of the signs that I know I'm struggling with this is something that I call the ugh in my stomach. Let me see if you know what I'm talking about here. Someone's name comes up in conversation and you feel a tightening in the stomach or in your head, or for some of us in the back. Or you walk into a party or a meeting and you see this person across the room and the ugh happens. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? And I'd like to think that the ugh in our stomach or our head or our back is something that is part of our design. It's a signal. My body is telling me I'm not in right relationship with another human being. And if we can pay attention to it, it is a reminder to us it's time to do something about that. There's a way to make some repairs or to work through a process to help us get back right with someone else. Probably my earliest really big ugh happened when I was 19 years old. I felt this, when I was at university, I felt this really intense sense that I needed to quit college, go on an adventure, and somehow figure out how to follow Jesus in his deferential care for those in poverty and struggle. And so I did that, quit college. I moved up to inner city Minneapolis, and I went to work at kind of an old-style gospel mission. And there was a couple older ladies that ran that place who'd been there for about 50 years. One of them was called the Mother Teresa of the North, and she was known throughout all of the Midwest for having come as an immigrant from Norway and started this mission. And they, to my surprise, invited me to come on staff. It was a big honor. They paid me as much as I would have made if I'd actually graduated from college. Suddenly, I'm given all of this amazing responsibility. I have my own classroom, and I'm teaching kids, and I'm running big programs on Saturdays and a whole bus ministry, and also doing the books and being the janitor. It was like intense. And over the course of those couple of months, they'd often make digs about my gender and say hurtful things, at least to my mind, about some of the people that we served. And one day, an older gentleman came into the mission, and he had, it was 20 degrees below zero. Some of you are native Californians, don't even know what this is. But it exists. It's really cold. And if you're out in those elements with your face uncovered or your hands for very long, you're going to get frostbite, and you will eventually die. And so this man came in without any gloves on, and he was asking me for some help to get some gloves. And I was about to go get him a pair of gloves when my boss stepped in and said, "What are you doing with this guy? He's a miserable drunk. You tell him, get out of here. You go somewhere else, and if you don't leave right now, I'm calling the police." And he stammered a bit and was kind of shocked at how he'd been treated. And she said, "You should go over to Catholic Charities for lunch." And he said, "What time is it?" And I held out my hand, she slapped my hand away and said, "Don't show him your watch. That's the oldest trick in the book." And she kicked him out. And at lunch that day, I said, "Hey, I'm disturbed with how you treated our client, and I don't understand that thing you were about my watch." And she said, "Well, he would have stole your watch." And I said, "I don't think so." She said, "Let me show you. Hold out your hand." And I held out my hand, and she went to grab my watch to show him what she thought he was going to do, and I pulled my hand away. And then she said, "No, let me do it this time." And my 70-year-old boss proceeded to rip the watch off my arm and punched me in the stomach and knocked me to the floor. I was devastated, like humiliated. This was in front of all the other staff. And she broke my watch, and I went back into my classroom, and I just sort of collapsed. And my idealism about inner city ministry collapsed, and a lot of things. For the next couple of years, I would look for any opportunity to share what had happened to me, the injustice of it, the humiliation of it. Because this was a person who was known by a lot of people in common with me, I went out of my way to let people know what a horrible employer this had been. And I sat with this sense of like, I was really wronged. Something is really messed up here. And it kind of ate away at me for a long time. I've had other experiences, not quite that dramatic, but similar, where someone I worked with or was close to, we had a misunderstanding or a hurt, and I'd get that ugh in my stomach about them. Unfortunately, and maybe for many of us this is the case, most of the people that I've experienced the most hurt from have been people, or struggle to forgive or have mercy towards, have been people I'm related to or close to. They're not strangers. And most of them have identified as followers of Jesus, which adds more complexity to that. And what I find ironic is that I have had other traumatic experiences that I don't carry resentment about. We've had people break windows on our car. We've had people break into our apartment and rob us. I was one time walking through Harlem a couple of years ago and was physically assaulted. Have not thought about it with any resentment since, because it was a stranger, because I didn't expect that person to treat me in a certain way. But it's those people closer to us that probably have the most potential to cause deep wounds in our lives. The other thing that gives me the ugh in the stomach is when someone's name's brought up in conversation, or I see them across the room at a party, and it's not that they've wronged me, it's that I'm feeling guilty about a mistake or a limitation or a misunderstanding. I know that I've hurt them in some way, whether intentionally or unintentionally, and that gives me that ugh in my stomach. So most of us at times in our lives have these sorts of experiences. I think so. Am I alone in this, or have you had experiences like this? And so how we handle those things really matters. And so I think it's worth us asking the question a little bit, who is it that I struggle to forgive or have mercy towards? And for what in my life do I need mercy? Well, let me throw one other thing out there, that I think sometimes what my tendency has been is to, maybe it wasn't me that was actually wrong, but someone close to me was wronged, and I take up their resentment on behalf of somebody else. I'm standing in judgment and resentment towards someone else. Each week, I've invited you to take a couple of minutes and us have a conversation together, because I think the things that we're going to look at from the teachings of Jesus have much more punch in our lives if we can relate them to experiences that we have had. Does that make sense? And one thing I've really appreciated about the Quest is your authenticity. Like right away, people just, they come up and they say, here's where I'm at, or here's what I've experienced in my life. That takes a lot of courage, and it takes a lot of trust. Today's conversation question, it might be a little deeper level than we went the first week or the second week. Would you be willing to go for it again, to take a risk? And I'm going to give you the option of doing one of two things. You could spend a couple of minutes just reflecting on this question by yourself. If you're at a space right now where you're like, I don't know if I'm ready to get into a heavy question like that. But if you feel safe enough, you can turn to another person in just a moment and respond to this question. Who do you struggle to forgive or have mercy towards? And what I want you to do is not name that person or give away, just say, let me tell you about the situation. Does that make sense? Because otherwise, if we get into, here's the exact person. So if it was someone that you're, if it was your father, maybe just say, I struggle to forgive someone I've been very close to in my life. Does that make sense? Keep a little boundary and things like that on there. And then you might want to also take the time to explore the question, for what in your life do you need mercy? When have you experienced failure or mistakes where you long to experience mercy or compassion from others? I know there's experiences like that for me, particularly the people closest to me. I know that there's ways that I have offended my parents or disrespected them. I know that there's ways that I've failed to be a loving and present husband or father or employer to others. And that weighs heavy on my heart sometimes as well. So let's open it up. Cool? You okay with that? Take about 5 minutes and respond to these questions together. Yeah, sure. Let's do it. I better turn off my microphone. Yeah.
But I'm going to ask Susie to save this, and I'll see if they record themselves.
Yeah. Let's keep talking, but all talk together. And I know it's a challenge when I ask, when I throw out a question that has such depth and complexity, and we all have a lot we can say about our experience with these things. So I hope you'll allow me to keep us moving forward, even though we could all probably go out to lunch with one or two people and keep talking about this stuff. But maybe I can share a few things that might help frame that further conversation about judgment and resentment. Let me first say this, that some things to notice about judgment and resentment is that we experience it as frustration in our relationships, that resentment and judgment tax our energy. It is a lot of work to walk around judging people or judging ourselves, right? Or feeling resentment towards others. And it actually brings stress to the body. That's partly why we feel it in the in the gut or the head or the back. I've been told that as we get older, whatever neural pathways that we have practiced and trained are the only ones that are going to stay. And several of the people that I know that work in palliative care or older people care suggest that for a lot of people at the end of their life, unfortunately, the ones that they've trained, the neural pathways they've trained the most are anxiety and worry, judgment, and resentment. And it seems like depending on our choices, we can either take the things we experience in life and learn to see them transformed, or we can act with the first impulse and practice those things. And it leads to very different results in later life. So you all probably know people who are older who are just a delight. They wake up and they're grateful and they are trusting and they're generous in their assessments. And then there's older people that you and I know that really struggle to say anything positive. And they've spent a lot of time rehearsing the resentments that they have in their lives. So it really matters how we process these things in our lives. Cliff and I were talking, and he was observing that he wondered, not just who do I have resentments towards, but who might I be giving the ugh to in my life, and what to do about that. I want you to just for a minute to imagine the possibility of a life free of judgments and resentments. What would that be like? In the Gospels, we see that Jesus believed that this kind of life is possible for us. He taught things like, do not judge and you will not be judged. Forgive and you will be forgiven. And one of the things that I appreciate about his teaching in the Beatitudes and the Sermon on the Mount is that Jesus was being very realistic about the things that we experience in our lives. We are wounded people, broken people, and that means that sometimes we make mistakes and we have limitations that hurt other people. And we live among everyone's broken, so we experience the brokenness, the limitations and mistakes of others in our lives as well. And so it really matters, and we need tools for how to work through our mutual brokenness. And one of the great challenges that we have is how to hold two things together: our own brokenness and the brokenness of others, and our belovedness and the belovedness of others. And it's so easy to see only one of those, to try and only look at the positive and the belovedness in us or others, or to only see the broken parts and the places that we feel pain or have caused us pain. So why is it a struggle for us to overcome judgments and resentments? I want to give you a couple of reasons why I think it is. One is that we want the world to be fair and just. There's something in our biology and design, in the development, in our mental development that is trying to parse out what's right and wrong. We did this when we were 2, 3, 4 years old. Who, in the story on TV or in the book, who's the bad guy and who's the good guy? Am I a good girl or a bad girl, right? And we're trying to figure out what's the right way to go. And to do that, we have to do some dividing work. Does that make sense? A second thing is that's related to that is this is how we develop a moral compass. We create a container that helps us have some structure to know how to live in the world. And a third thing is that we tend to believe that we must punish others or ourselves when we go against those structures that we put in place. And in the work that I've done on this topic in groups where we have the time like to spend an hour or two really hashing out and talking about this, the interesting thing that often comes up is that the hardest person the person I find hardest to forgive or have compassion towards is actually myself. Sometimes it's easier to even forgive others. So with each of the Beatitudes, I think there is a natural tendency, and the one on this Beatitude is a natural tendency towards tit for tat, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. People should get what's coming to them. I should and other people should get what we deserve. And it's maybe those things are necessary. That way of seeing is necessary and helpful for part of our development. But at a certain point, if we don't make the flip, if we stay in that container, just like the butterfly or the caterpillar in the cocoon, it's going to imprison us. And so at a certain point, we have to break out of that particular way of thinking into a new way of thinking. So one question that might be helpful to ask, with our tendency towards tit for tat, everybody should get what they deserve, is would we want to live in a world where everyone gets exactly what their actions deserve? No. Okay. Pardon?
That's something I always told my children
Yeah. Yeah, we wouldn't want to live in the world where it was exactly like that. The book of James says, mercy triumphs over judgment, promising us a kindness that goes beyond the consequences of our actions or the retribution we might feel others deserve. So I want to suggest healthy relationships are based on grace or mercy rather than tit for tat. Imagine being in a friendship or a parent-child relationship or a marriage-type partnership where we're keeping a record of all the things that each has done. And if you do this, I will do this. And if you don't do this or you don't fulfill what I expect, then we're not in relationship. That's often why those close relationships fall apart, is because if we get into that tit for tat understanding of the relationship. So healthy relationships are based on something more than tit for tat. And the Creator relates to us like a healthy parent in this way. We explored this a little bit last week. It's not, the Creator has the ability to hold our brokenness and belovedness together, to delight in us, and also to see the ways that we are broken, flawed, struggling to live in reality, and have a deep amount of compassion for us in our struggle in that. And so what I like to say about this is the truest thing about you and every other person in this room and in this world is not that you're broken or flawed, but that you are beloved. And if we can hold on to that for ourselves and extend that to others, we get to live in this way of compassion. So I want to talk about a couple of practices that can help us to live into that. And let me suggest that sometimes we are able to grow and change because we have a cognitive aha. We get some insight. And sometimes we just have to start acting as if something is true, and it moves in from action and from the body up into the head, right? And so I'm going to give you a couple practices that can help us do both of those things. One is training about how we look at ourselves and one another. And one time I I was in a group where we were looking at the passage where Jesus said, "Do not judge, and you won't be judged." And we were talking about, and the person leading the discussion was sharing some, like he Googled that text and was sharing all the interesting things he'd seen on Wikipedia about the text. And it was kind of esoteric and philosophical. And I got a little frustrated, and finally I just said, okay, what was Jesus really getting at here? And I asked the question, how many of us struggle with judgments and resentments? We regularly look at people and make harsh judgments and assessments about them. And I raised my hand and said, anybody here besides me who struggles with making judgments and resentments? Everybody else's hands went up. And we said, well, if we struggle with this and Jesus said, don't do it, don't stop judging, how could we learn to do that? And we looked back through and noticed particular ways that Jesus looked at people. And the gospel writers noted some particular places about him doing something physical, but using his eyes to look, and then what was going on in his heart or motive. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion. When the Lord saw her, his heart went out to her. Jesus looked at him and loved him. So I've done experiments before where I would go out for an hour or sometimes a couple hours, and I would say, can I see others in the way that's true, most true about them, the way God sees them? And what often happens when I try and do this is that I look at someone, and the first thing that happens is I start evaluating, are they attractive or unattractive? Are they like me or not like me? Do I feel safe or do I feel threatened, right? And I make those kinds of assessments. And when I do this practice, I have to do this flip where I go, let's not stay with the first instinct. Let me see a little bit deeper. And I go, actually, who I'm looking at is a person made in the divine image and is beloved. And so I'm training myself to see in a new way. C.S. Lewis once said about this topic, and a few years ago I actually got to stand in the chapel where he preached this sermon in Oxford, England. He said, there are no ordinary people. You have never talked to a mere mortal. It is a serious thing to live in a society of possible gods and goddesses, to remember that the dullest, most uninteresting person you can talk to may one day be a creature which, if you saw it now, you would be strongly tempted to bow down and worship. So I'm going to invite you to try something with me right now. Stand up, and I want you to make that shape that we've been practicing, eyes of compassion. And I would like you to turn to one other person and take a minute to make sure everybody's got a person, okay? So turn to one other person. And I want you to try and look directly in their eyes. And after you get over the giggles and the awkwardness of looking them in the eye, I would like you to silently, as you're looking in their eyes, think these words: beloved child of God, may you be well. And if you want to say them out loud, you can say them out loud. And let's just hold that gaze for a few minutes. You are looking at somebody made in the divine image, someone the Creator calls beloved. Yeah. So hold that gaze for another moment. And I want you to notice what it's like for you inside to look at somebody with an intentionally compassionate gaze. And I also want you to notice, what is it like for you right now, knowing that someone is looking at you with that compassionate, non-judgmental gaze? How does that impact you? Okay, you can relax your arms and go ahead and sit back down. So like we talked about last week, our struggle is to take good knowledge and integrate it into our whole self and our whole experience. And I noticed for some of you, while we were doing that, that's what was happening. It was the reality of your belovedness was starting to sink in just a little bit deeper, or you were paying more attention to it than maybe normal. A second practice that can help us resonate with the way of compassion is about how we talk about ourselves, how we talk about others. And with our mouths, we can rehearse judgments and resentments, or we can practice being compassionate. Does that make sense? And a practice that's really helped me, because I really struggle with this, is at times I have made vows. Like one time when I was really struggling with jealousy, I realized, what if I made a vow that for the next 40 days, I wouldn't say anything negative about another human being or myself? And I want to invite you to take on this practice this week. And at the end of my talk, I'm going to invite you, if you want to say, yes, I'll commit to this, to try this for 7 days, to say, I promise to practice positive speech. For the next 7 days, I'll only speak words of compassion and affirmation about myself and others, and avoid making critical and disparaging comments. Something that this practice does is it helps us notice how often we actually make judgmental and resentful comments. And if you make a commitment to this, you'll maybe go, oh, I'm going to have to bite my tongue. Look at how often I do this. Sometimes we do it about ourselves. Sometimes we do it about people we know, or like Jane, you were talking about, we do it about the person who's driving in a way we don't appreciate. Or for me, Lisa and I were on a walk this week, and we were like having all this resentment towards tourists walking through our neighborhood. And they don't know which side of the sidewalk, and they come out of a shop and stand in a pack of 6 or 8 people. And we're like, come on, we're trying to get somewhere. Get out of here, right? And so it would be a discipline for Lisa and I this week to say no bad talk about tourists, okay, when we walk through the neighborhood. That might help us move towards the way of compassion. A third practice I'd invite you to try, and I'm guessing many of us have done work on this, is about how we remember and the practice of letting go. If we're not careful, we can continue to carry resentments and judgments. And some of you might be familiar with this sort of truism that goes around. Resentment is like drinking poison and waiting for someone else to die. When we feel the injustice of somebody else's actions, it's easy to keep rehearsing it, and it actually is hurting us. They're not being hurt by our resentment. It's weighing us down. And so a good question for us to ask when we're struggling with resentment is, how's that working out for you? You know, is anything different or better because you're holding on to this? What are you getting out of holding on to that resentment? Might it be time to hear the whispers of invitation to let it go, to not keep carrying it? To do that, I think there's some important clarifications we need to make about what forgiveness is and isn't. Forgiveness doesn't mean denying deep pain. Like, the pain is there, it is real, and it's okay to acknowledge the depth of that and not dismiss it. And for some of us to really let go and forgive, we need to take some time, and we need the help of a friend or a therapist to say, here is the profound ways that I was hurt, and to have someone else look you in the eye, to tear up with you and agree with you. That was an awful thing that happened to you. That shouldn't have happened. I'm so sad that happened. Forgiveness does not imply condoning hurtful behavior. So you're not saying it doesn't matter what that person did to me. It actually was very serious, and we're not changing, we don't have to change on that. This is an interesting one. It's not contingent on the other person admitting they're wrong. Sometimes we just hope, I will be able to forgive this person when they'll finally admit all the ways that they've hurt me. But if we wait for that, people don't always have the insight. Or some people who have hurt us are not here anymore, and they don't have the opportunity to tell us to admit to those things. And so it's something we can go first on and say, I'm going to let this go for me because it's not good for me to hold on to that. And another very important clarification, forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation. Reconciliation requires the person who's done wrong to admit that they were wrong and to make amends and to go through a process of rebuilding trust. And that takes a lot more work. I think a first step towards doing this is with the people that you live life with, if we can get in the habit of very quickly letting each other know, hey, I was wrong about that. And it's okay to say when we're wrong and to say, would you be willing to forgive me for that? Instead of just burying those feelings down, if we have the amount of trust where we can say, that was hurtful, or I felt like that you talked real short to me there, or that wasn't respectful. And if the other, or if we, even better, if we can initiate it, whoa, what I just said, that was harsh. I'm sorry, will you forgive me? It lends itself to that. But for deep pain, and many of us have this, this is going to take a bit more work. And a couple of things that I know are helpful in this process. And again, forgiveness isn't something magical where I decide once I'm going to let it go and then it's never going to come back. Sometimes every time the hurt or that person comes to my mind, I have to do another practice of letting go. A couple things that help me with this and have helped many people is, one is to consent to the law of cause and effect. And what I'm suggesting is that on one level, karma is for real. You see it in Scripture. A person reaps what they sow. Everybody gets what they deserve, okay? But that's not the only level of reality, okay? We're also treated by our Creator better than we deserve. And this is a better world when we can treat each other better than our actions deserve, so it doesn't limit us in that way. And so when someone's hurt me, I can say, if they continue in this way, it's not going to bring good results in their life. I don't have to be the judge, and I don't have to be the consequence giver on this. That person is going to experience the natural consequences of what happens when you act like this. It's also helpful for many people to try and understand what the other person was going through. Think about it for yourself. When I have limitations and I make mistakes, and it doesn't excuse what I do to other people, but there's definitely some pressures and context that shapes how I show up to other people. And sometimes it helps me to let go for myself to say, I was sick, I was tired, I was stressed, and I would never choose to act in that way towards another person, but my capacities were stretched beyond my ability in that situation. And if I can understand that for myself, the people who have hurt me probably have had things that shaped their behavior, limitations and a small skill set that led them to treat you in that same way. That can help us move towards letting go of resentments and forgiving. A third thing that I think is helpful to see is that we're actually is to see from a larger perspective. We're actually part of a larger cosmic struggle between the forces of good and evil. And when I'm impacted negatively by forces of evil in the world, I have a choice. I can either internalize that pain and transmit it, to be a wounded wounder, right? Or I can do the work to see that pain transformed, to make a new choice about that. My slides are slightly out of the order that I want to go with this, so I'm just going to mention this right now because it's the right place. One of the things I learned a few years ago about Martin Luther King Jr. is what prompted him to become part of the civil rights movement. And the singular event that happened in his life is that he spoke out about something in the town of Montgomery, and someone threw a bomb through the front window of their house and endangered the lives of his family. And he realized at that moment what it would, like, I'm faced with a very serious choice here. I can spend the rest of my life being angry and resentful towards whoever threatened my family. Or I can move towards what he called the beloved community. I can take the hurt of that and say, I want to be part of the solution. I want to be part of imagining and working towards a different and a better world. And so this gets at some of the more radical things that Jesus taught in the Gospels. Love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. And so after I've done some of this work, when I'm still struggling to forgive, something that I've practiced doing is I have a list of people that give me the ugh because of the hurts they've given me. I actually made, these days you can search out and find pictures of people who have hurt you. And so for weeks at a time, when I get up in the morning, I will look at pictures of people who have hurt me over the years that I'm struggling to forgive. And as my quiet time or my meditation time or prayer time in the morning, I will look at their faces and I'll remember that. I'm invited to bless those who've cursed me. And I will repeat this. I'll look in their eyes and say, may you find peace, embrace goodness and love, and experience what is most real and true. And this is like this is like a deep circuit training workout for compassion, right? That has proved very helpful to me. And it models what Jesus did, who's our model and inspiration for the way of compassion. While he's hanging on the cross, unjustly accused, beaten within an inch of his life, and discredited publicly, he turns to the people who have done that to him and says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they are doing. So here's my invitation for you this week, is to take on a couple of practices that will help you deepen your experience of the way of compassion. For some of you, maybe you need to take some time to do a little bit of journaling work about letting go, to think more deeply about what are the mistakes and limitations you struggle to forgive yourself for, and who you struggle to forgive, and respond to some of these journal questions. And if it's helpful to you, talk that over with a trusted friend or mentor. Then now is the time where I'm going to ask you for a verbal commitment to something. What if all of us here, or many of us here, could commit to practicing positive speech for the next week? Would you be willing to make a promise together to do this, to say, I promise to practice positive speech. For the next 7 days, I will only speak words of compassion and affirmation about myself and others and politicians, and avoid making critical and disparaging comments. Anybody in with me? Thumbs up. Let's see what happens if we make this commitment this week. And finally, maybe it would be helpful for you to do a formal exercise of eyes of compassion. And so 2 invitations. One is go for a walk in a busy area this week over your lunch break or another time during the day for 30 to 60 minutes and practice looking at people and recognizing that they are God's beloved. And you might just quietly under your breath think, child of God, may you be well. Child of God, may you be well. Learn to see in a new way. And if you're really struggling with letting go, maybe do like I've done and create that document on your computer with those photos on it, and look in the eyes of the people that you struggle most to forgive. I'm going to invite the band to come up now. We were talking about the way of compassion last week, and I said, I know this song that's popular right now, that there's a musician named Kesha who for years was physically and sexually abused by her producer. And it sent her into an intense amount of trauma eating disorders and stuff like that. And recently, with her last album, she's been trying to work through letting go of those things. And so this is a song that she wrote that is in the process of that. Matt, it doesn't sound like she's quite done with the work, but she's really trying to move from tit for tat, from retribution, to letting go, to free herself and to free that other person. So I'm going to invite you to just listen to these words as the band plays.
Well, you almost had me fooled. Told me that I was nothing without you. But after everything you've done, I can thank you for how strong I've become. 'Cause you brought the flames and you put me through hell. I had to learn how to fight for myself, and we both know all the truth I can tell. I'll just say this is I wish you farewell. I hope you're somewhere praying, praying. I hope your soul is changing, changing. I hope you find your peace, falling on your knees, praying. I'm proud of who I am. No more monsters, I can breathe again. And you said that I was done. Well, you were wrong, and now the best is yet to come. 'Cause I could make it on my own.
Let's pray. Lord, you treat us better than our actions deserve. You see beyond our brokenness to our belovedness. And we want to learn to resonate with your heart of compassion. We want to learn to let go of the resentments that are sapping our energy and taking away from us, and to make that flip to love our enemies, to pray for those who have persecuted us, and to live in the way of mercy together. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Pray this with me. Lead us in the way of compassion. Let's say it together. Lead us in the way of compassion. Amen.
So before you go, remember we do have a congregational meeting right after the little snack time. So please come back and join us. We'll see you in a little bit. We'll be back in about 10 minutes, everybody, okay? 10 minutes.